China's Yangtze River is seeing its biggest flooding in the past 40 years. Almost 2,000 people have been evacuated. And for the first time in decades, floodwater reached a famous giant Buddha statue's toes. China's Belt and Road Initiative involves 2/3 of the world's population. It could serve as the base for an authoritarian superpower on land and in the air. In a show of force, a U.S. warship sailing through the water between China and Taiwan, and for the first time crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait and approaching the Chinese coastline. And during a visit to an area hit by floods, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, visited peasants. But in reality, he was received by a police officer disguised as a peasant. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now we turn to a famous giant Buddha statue in southwest China. For the first time in decades, floodwater reached the monument's toes. The sitting Buddha stretches over 200 feet high. It was carved out of a hillside near Chengdu City in Sichuan Province around 1,200 years ago. As a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it stands as a popular attraction, often featured in river cruises, though it was closed to visitors on Monday amid rising water. The river at the statue's feet is called the Ming River. It's the largest tributary of the upper Yangtze River. The statue normally rests around 20 feet above the waterline. Summer flooding is common in the region, but the waters haven't reached the statue's feet in the last 70 years. The surrounding area is almost completely submerged. According to a local hydrographic station, the peak water flow rate reached 30,000 cubic meters per second on Tuesday. One video shows people seen standing on higher ground in the water waiting to be rescued. State media reported that nearly 200 tourists had to be rescued from the site. Now on to floods in China. The upstream of the Yangtze River is seeing its biggest flooding in the past 4 decades. Up north, a local resident told us about her narrow escape from deadly floodwaters. NTD's Juliet Song has the story.
The latest wave of flooding on the Yangtze River is now passing through Chongqing, a megacity in China's southwest. And for the first time ever, local authorities raised the flood emergency response to its highest level. Floodwaters submerged many areas in the city, from the waterfront walkways to its landmark building, the largest dock in the city. Residents moved their belongings through the water. Inside the city stands a ruler that measures the height of the floodwaters. It's almost 700 feet above the ground level. An internet user posted a photo of the ruler, now submerged in water, only showing the ball at the top. Up north in the northwest Gansu, a resident recounts a narrow escape from floodwaters. To protect her identity, we have given her a pseudonym and distorted her voice.
If we didn't run away as fast as we did yesterday, we could have died inside our home.
Wang said the water was over 6 feet high and submerged her entire home.
I ran for my life, and I didn't get to bring my belongings, not even my money.
She knew a couple that were washed away by the flooding. One of Gansu's most famous ancient towns is also submerged in floodwater. Juliet Song, NTD News.
Floods have been battering China's southwest and northwest. But strangely, Communist Party's head Xi Jinping has been visiting the southeastern province of Anhui since Tuesday. Anhui was among the worst-hit provinces in July, but now the farmland there has re-emerged. According to Chinese state-run media, Xi visited local farmers during his trip. One photograph shows him meeting with this woman and child. But netizens soon discovered another photo of hers, this time wearing an official uniform. The woman is actually the deputy captain of a public order group, part of Anhui Province's Public Security Bureau, the same region Xi visited. In an interview with Radio Free Asia, former political science teacher at Beijing's Tsinghua University, Wu Qiang, said this situation is a common one in China. He explained that for inspections by the regime or high-level authorities, such performances are actually commonplace. In the past 8 years, we have seen that almost every time a CCP leader went to conduct an inspection, a similar situation could be identified afterwards. Although the situation in Anhui may have calmed down, floods and other disasters are still raging elsewhere. China suffered a double blow on Wednesday when both a flood and a typhoon hit this country. Typhoon Higis drenched Hong Kong overnight on Tuesday. That's before coming ashore in Zhuhai, a southern Chinese coastal city, on Wednesday morning. China's National Meteorological Center reported that Typhoon Higis' maximum sustained movement speed reached nearly 80 miles per hour, while its maximum wind speed near the storm center clocked in at over 70 miles per hour. All schools in Zhuhai City, from kindergarten to college, have been closed. Flights are also suspended. In one stadium, thousands were seen taking shelter in attempts to avoid the storm. Combined with the strong winds, flood water quickly submerged local streets. Now we turn to Wuhan, the same city where the CCP virus first emerged late last year. Thousands of people were seen packed shoulder to shoulder under flashing strobe lights and with dance music blaring, and no one is seen to be wearing masks. That's during a major pool hosted on Saturday in a Wuhan water park. Back in late January, the same city became the first to go under virus lockdown, leaving streets deserted while residents observed strict social distancing rules. Months later in June, Wuhan authorities claimed to have tested 11 million people within 10 days. Information from hospitals and funeral homes have confirmed that the Chinese regime has been hugely underreporting the country's confirmed cases and death toll. Local authorities said the water park only allowed 3,000 visitors to attend the event, all of whom had tested negative for the infection. But due to the CCP's lack of transparency, it's difficult to estimate the actual risk. Suspicions that the CCP virus never actually vanished from Wuhan persist among Chinese netizens and others. China recently ordered to stop wasting food, and local authorities have responded with various measures. Shanghai has even introduced a reporting mechanism, which has aroused public criticism and directed people's attention to officials using public money for dinner parties and banquets.
Earlier this week, authorities of China's biggest city, Shanghai, issued a notice stating that in addition to encouraging restaurants to provide half-dish and small-dish ordering services, the authorities would also establish a means to report on food being wasted, focusing on business, wedding, and funeral banquets. If the people reported do not change their behavior, it would be made public to shame them. Ms. Ma from Shanghai told us normal people have no money to waste food at all.
The ordinary people have difficult lives. It makes no sense for them to waste food.
Ms. Zhang said only the officials who use public money for dinner parties will waste food.
Ordinary people go to cheap places to eat. Generally, they don't eat out. Especially in Shanghai, we don't have the habit of eating out. Eating at home can save money. Only people who use public funds at dinner parties waste food.
According to Chinese media, in 2012, more than $40 billion of public funds were used for dinner parties and banquets for officials. On average, over 820,000 public-funded dinner parties take place every day across China. It's a common scenario that after these kinds of dinner parties, most of the food is left over and thrown away. Ms. Ma said it's absurd to try to report on wasted food.
The officials with much power and public funds are having extravagant banquets. We ordinary people have no access to those places at all. We can't see it. How can we report it?
Mr. Cheng from Shanghai said even when ordinary people can report these officials, the officials will retaliate against them. Reporting by Xiong Bin and Zhong Yuan, NTD News.
China's Belt and Road Initiative now involves over 130 countries and 2/3 of the world's population. It could serve as the base of an authoritarian superpower, connecting economic, financial, and military spheres, as well as an online sector complete with control and censorship.
According to the Belt and Road News website, in the post-COVID era, Beijing's power over Central Asia could greatly expand, helping propel it along the fast track towards superpower status. Back in 2013, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, adopted its Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure development project aimed at connecting Asia with Africa and Europe. And since its start, China has proudly touted the strategy's achievements, but the regime seems to be using it as a foothold to export its control. China has already used the initiative to trap some participating countries with debt crises. It's done by building infrastructure projects on loan, like roads, ports, and energy networks, for poorer nations. But when those countries become unable to pay back the debt, they're forced to cede control of the finished structures to China. The practice gives China power over foreign regions and is often used in places with strategic value, like port cities. As of last October, over 130 countries in the Asia-Pacific region, Africa, and Europe have already signed on or expressed intent to do so. In addition to road building, the regime is also using the Belt and Road Initiative to construct a state-run banking network. Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB, is one of the main loan providers for Belt and Road construction projects. The bank opened just 1 year after Belt and Road was launched, with the CCP as its main source of funding. Up till now, AIIB has recorded a $10 billion investment total and boasts over 100 member nations, including major Western players like Canada, Australia, Germany, and France. As for financials, most Belt and Road-related transactions are handled in US dollars using SWIFT, a vast banking network used to securely send and receive information. It's the most globally used system and is dominated by the US. But in order to achieve independence from the US, the Communist Party introduced its own digital currency. Zhu Min was the former vice president of the Central Bank of China and is now president of Tsinghua University's National Institute of Finance. He said recently that the development of digital currency is an important step towards internationalizing China's renminbi, more commonly known as the yuan. He explained that using the renminbi instead of the US dollar to invest the future Belt and Road projects is a major move for China. It will play a big role in expanding renminbi-based investments globally. The decision for China's central bank to endorse digital currency was made as a vehicle to progress that goal. Last week, China's Ministry of Commerce announced that almost 30 provinces and regions will launch a project involving digital currency circulation. That's more than 80% of the country's entire territory. While Chinese people are being urged toward the country's digital currency experiment, Chinese companies are looking for growth opportunities during the shift. Social media app WeChat's parent company, Tencent, founded the Digital Currency Research Group last year. According to reports, it strives to be the Belt and Road Initiative's official wallet. Earlier this month, the U.S. banned transactions with WeChat and TikTok. The move came amid accusations that the app captures personal information from their users and hand it over to the Chinese regime. But the biggest opportunity seeker surrounding the Belt and Road project is Chinese tech giant Huawei. Zhang Yansheng, chief researcher of China's Center for International Economic Exchanges, says Huawei's success is all thanks to Belt and Road. He explained that when Huawei was young and weak, 70% of its sales came from overseas markets, mainly Asia, Africa, and Latin America, the same regions where Belt and Road projects were being constructed. Huawei is now the world's biggest telecom equipment maker, not to mention a prime case study about the CCP's espionage, intellectual property theft, and influence operations. A U.S. Justice Department indictment alleged that Huawei's headquarters launched a former policy in 2013 to reward employees who stole confidential information from competitors. Elsewhere in the technology sphere, there's a new satellite service on the block. Enter Beidou, the Chinese satellite navigation system that's trying to replace GPS. In June, the final network satellite for the Beidou 3 system was launched. Now, China is set to conduct a system-wide test. Its goal? To provide global users with around-the-clock, all-weather, high-precision GPS services. According to the system's chief designer, Beidou will provide basic navigation services to Belt and Road partnered countries. Chinese state media report that more than 120 countries are already using the services. Beidou combines MEO, GEO, and IGSO orbits. The latter two are designed to guarantee more accurate positioning in the Asia-Pacific and Belt and Road regions. The service will greatly increase developing countries' independence on China's vast communications infrastructure. It also raises the risk that information will be censored or manipulated in these countries. Beijing has repeatedly said that Beidou is meant for civil use, but some articles circulating online tell a different story. One of them lists a question and answer section about the service, with one portion touching on how Beidou will serve China's national security. The writer explained, "The completion of Beidou means that we will be able to do everything GPS can do. We'll also be able to break free from others' restraints. We cannot say enough about its importance to national security." Inside the Belt and Road Initiative, the CCP is carrying out a three-dimensional strategy: ground-based infrastructure, submarine cable networks, and Beidou in sky. Besides the dependence other countries may develop as a result, the system will have the means to collect a huge amount of data, all of which can be sent straight to the Communist Party. Reporting by Xu Wenhui, NTD News.
Taiwan is accusing mainland China of trying to infiltrate its government agencies. That's after several departments, including some officials' email accounts, were hijacked by hackers.
Taiwan says China was behind cyber attacks that aim to steal important data from the government. Taiwan has been urging its people to be alert for what officials call an omnipresent infiltration from China. It includes Beijing-backed media campaigns and cyber attacks against the island.
Basically, we found that some of the IP addresses and other login domains of the hacking groups are those malicious domains and IP addresses which some mainland hacking groups often use.
Liu explained that external maintenance vendors are generally responsible for managing the important information systems for Taiwan's government agencies. The hacking group sometimes use those service providers as a springboard to strike and obtain important documents from government agencies. The attacks, which started as early as 2018, have targeted at least 10 government agencies and the email accounts of some 6,000 officials.
The United States on Tuesday sent a warship through the Taiwan Strait. A Taiwanese lawmaker says the ship unprecedentedly crossed the median line of the water to the Chinese side.
A U.S. warship sailed through the Taiwan Strait on Tuesday. According to Taiwanese lawmaker Wang Ting-yu, the ship for the first time passed through the median line of the Taiwan Strait, making it the closest a U.S. warship has sailed to the Chinese coastline. Wang is the chairman of the Taiwanese legislature's Defense Committee. The U.S. guided missile destroyer is the seventh American warship to sail through the narrow body of water between Taiwan and China this year. The Navy said the transit demonstrates the U.S. commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. Taiwan confirmed the warship's passage, calling it a routine transit.
The American warship sailing through the Taiwan Strait is conducting an ordinary sailing assignment.
An expert told Yahoo News the significance of the warship passing the median line is debatable, but the United States is sending a message to China that Chinese assertiveness in the South China Sea and in relation to Taiwan will be contested. The Chinese military conducted military drills in the Taiwan Strait last week. Beijing claims Taiwan is its territory and says it won't rule out using force to reunify Taiwan with the mainland. The U.S. does not have formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan, but promised to provide weapons of defensive character to the island. However, analysts have been predicting possible changes of the status quo, given recent changes in U.S. foreign policy toward China. Last week, U.S. Health Secretary Alex Azar visited Taiwan's president, the most senior Washington cabinet official to visit Taiwan since the U.S. established diplomatic relations with Beijing. Mixed messages are coming out of Beijing over U.S. moves in the Indo-Pacific. China's military on Wednesday called the latest U.S. sailing extremely dangerous and accusing the U.S. of making trouble. Its state-owned Central Television said that it's possible that we will conduct military exercises around the island of Taiwan and that the first battle will be the last one. Compared to the threatening tone, another Chinese state media, the Global Times, published an opinion piece this week calling on the armies of the three sides not to fire the first shot, saying they should communicate with each other and prevent military conflict. Beijing has ramped up military exercises aimed at Taiwan since the current president, Tsai Ing-wen, took power. Taiwan's foreign minister said last month that China sending military planes near Taiwan is virtually a daily occurrence. Reporting by Penny Zhou, NTD News.
The U.S. Department of State has announced that the U.S. will suspend its 3 bilateral agreements with Hong Kong. The move is a response to China's so-called national security law in the territory. The State Department says the law has crushed the freedoms of the people of Hong Kong. The president's executive order on Hong Kong normalization is part of an ongoing response to Beijing's heavy-handed control of a region it had once promised a high degree of autonomy. But no longer. Under the new EO, preferential treatment for Hong Kong is suspended and eliminated. The 3 bilateral agreements severed were the surrender of fugitive offenders, the transfer of sentenced persons, and reciprocal tax exemptions on income from the international operation of ships. President Trump said the U.S. will treat Hong Kong as one country, one system, rather than one country, two systems, and take action against individuals who have dashed the freedoms of Hong Kongers. President Trump says he does not want to talk with China right now. That's after a planned review of the Phase 1 trade deal was canceled. The president said it was because of what they did to the U.S. and to the world, referring to the CCP virus.
President Trump says he's postponed trade talks with China. When asked at an event in Yuma, Arizona, whether he will pull out of the China trade deal, the president said he would see.
I postponed them. I postponed talks with China. You know why? I don't want to deal with them now. I don't want to deal with them now. With what they did to this country and to the world, I don't want to talk to China right now.
The meeting via video conference had been scheduled for Saturday, with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer meeting Chinese Vice Premier Liu He. According to reports, it was canceled indefinitely as of August 14th.
Let me tell you, what China did to the world was not even thinkable. They could have stopped it. They stopped it from going into China, and they should have stopped it. So that's correct. I canceled talks with China.
The trade agreement requires Beijing to import $200 billion worth of additional U.S. goods and services over the next 2 years. But China has been falling way short. The president also remarked that if Democratic rival Joe Biden got into office as president, China would dramatically increase its control over the United States. President Trump is taking an increasingly tough stance on China. The U.S. has identified that Beijing's actions repeatedly threaten America's core values.
Ecuador is facing another problem with Chinese vessels fishing off the coast of the Galapagos Islands. Now, a number of vessels have turned off tracking systems so that they can't be spotted.
Ecuador's armed forces said the Chinese vessels near the Galapagos Islands have turned off their tracking systems to prevent monitoring of their activities. Over 300 ships are still fishing in the waters near the ecologically sensitive Galapagos. Almost half of them have at some point in recent months cut off communications. Some had even changed their names.
May I use as an example the fact satellite systems are being turned off, so it's obvious we will not be able to determine their location, where they are, who they are, or where they came from.
Ecuador says the fleet has not entered its territorial waters, but environmentalists say this type of fishing allows vessels to take advantage of the abundant marine wildlife in the area.
The type of fishing they are doing, we have been able to determine the cold current of Humboldt in particular provides the perfect conditions to fish giant squid. These are known as squid fishing vessels.
Since 2017, the fishing fleet has visited the outskirts of the Galapagos protected area during the summer months. The area attracts marine species such as the giant squid or the hammerhead shark, the latter of which is a threatened species. Ecuador is seeking to prevent predatory fishing off its coast. At the same time, the country is avoiding confrontation with China, its largest financier and major market for its shrimp export business.
Shrimp imports from Ecuador have recently come under fire in China. Chinese state media reported the CCP virus was found on packaging of imported shrimp from Ecuador. Some Chinese shoppers are now avoiding imported products for fear of catching the virus. Both the World Health Organization and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration say there's no evidence food can be a source of infection. Fear over the risks posed by imported frozen food first rose when the virus was reportedly found on a chopping board in Beijing's Xinfadi wholesale market in June. The vendor had used the board to handle imported salmon. Ecuador is working on a renegotiation deal to restructure its over $17 billion international debt. Part of the deal includes getting new loans from China, over $2 billion by August. New economic advisors to the Ecuadorian government strongly advise against repeating past mistakes regarding China. They agree negotiations with China are important, but not to promise more crude oil. Ecuador has racked up a hefty debt with China throughout the years. A borrowing spree under the Correa administration led to the debt with China totaling $6.5 billion in 2018. Ecuador's largest energy project started taking shape in 2010, largely due to Chinese loans and workers. It's called the Coca-Cola Sinclair Dam. The New York Times reported the dam was to provide a third of Ecuador's electricity and lift the country out of poverty. Instead, the project was disastrous. The dam sits under an active volcano. Its machinery is lined with cracks due to low-quality steel. When workers tried to run it at full throttle, it shorted the country's national grid. Now it only runs at half capacity. But Ecuador still has to pay China. It owes $19 billion for the dam and other infrastructure projects. And China wants it paid in oil, Ecuador's most valuable export. It now has the right to 80% of it. Critics called China's lending practices debt diplomacy. In recent years, Beijing poured billions of dollars into developing countries to help build their infrastructure. When countries can't repay the loans, Beijing then seizes control of their key assets. Ecuador owes China more money than it owes any other country. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.